Okay, we're going to do Math Review 3-6 real quick. The first problem is dividing decimals with models. And we need to write an equation that has to do with division. So if you remember this, we're going to be doing something divided by something equals to something, because it's a division equation. So there's this star for the division symbol and the equal sign. Now we need to know how many we have total in my dividend. So I'm highlighting all of the wholes, so that's 8 of them altogether. So my dividend starts with an 8. Then I know that I have end, because after that I don't have any more wholes, I have fraction parts. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths, so that's going to be a 4 in the tenths place. And then finally I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the little bitty squares, which means those are 8 hundredths. So my dividend is 8 and 48 hundredths. If you have that, you get a star. And I'm going to divide them into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal groups. So that's my divisor. And that's going to give you a star as well. And my quotient is going to come from what's inside one of the groups. So that's going to be 2 wholes and 1 tenth and 2 hundredths. So my final answer is 2 and 12 hundredths. So the key idea for this one is to remember that an equation must have or has an equal sign. And that's your star for if you wrote down the key idea. So the total number of stars for these questions is 6. Next problem, we have multiplication of decimals. We're going to write an equation with multiplication in there. So something times something equals something. By the way, if you're listening to my instruction, I'm going to give you 5 Bronco Bucks, and you better tell me the word Grinch, like the Grinch who stole Christmas. All right. So when you're finished with this, come to me, okay? So now here is the first star for the multiplication symbol and the star for the equal sign. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring your attention to this red section that I'm doing right now, which is the whole entire blue section. So you have 9 complete rows of blue. So that's going to represent 9 tenths. That's your first factor. That's going to give you the first star for the numbers. And then you have this blue section that I'm outlining in blue, which really is yellow. So the yellow columns are 5 of them, so that's 5 tenths. So that's your second factor there. That's going to give you a star. And finally, the area that I'm now flashing at you in purple or magenta is the area that's in green. That's where the 2 shades cross. So if you count all the little bitty squares in there, you'll see that you have 45 of them. So your answer is 45, but it's 45 hundredths, because it takes 100 little squares to make a whole. So make sure you put a 0 in front for good mathematical practice, and you end up with 45 hundredths as your final answer, as your product. So this would be the key idea. It's an equation must have an equal sign, just like the other key idea for equations. And then you also get a total star of 6, total number of stars of 6. The next question is dividing decimals. For dividing decimals, we're going to use the algorithm. We're going to write the first number as our dividend inside the division and the divisor on the outside. Okay, so after you tell me the word Grinch, if you want another 5 Bronco Bucks, because you're listening to my instruction, you're also going to tell me that the Grinch is awesome. Okay, so we have 3, the 7 gets you a star, and the 3 gets you a star. Now we have the 7 that goes, that you can go 3 divided by 7 2 times, because 3 times 2 is 6. So the 2 goes the first digit in your quotient, and when you subtract 6 from the 7, you end up with 1. That gives you a star if you subtract it correctly. The next step is to bring down the next number, which is the 7. So now you end up with 17. And 3 goes into 17 5 times, so that's going to give you a star. 3 times 5 is 15. If you subtract it from 17, you get 2, and that gives you a star. So we have a remainder of 2, but we can't finish now because we're dividing decimals, which means we have to put a decimal after the 77 so we can continue dividing. That decimal gives you a star if you wrote it in. Then the decimal needs to be brought up straight to the quotient, and that's going to give you a star if you brought it up. Now we can add a 0 inside the dividend, and that gives you a star, and then you can bring it down, and you end up with 20. So 3 goes into 26 times, and that gives you a star in the quotient. 3 times 6 gives you 18. If you subtract 20 minus 18, you get a remainder of 2. So, since you still have a remainder, you have to, or you get a star for that if you get the remainder of 2. You have to add another 0, and that gets you a star as well. Bring down that 0, and you end up with 20. Notice that you end up with the same thing, so the same number is going to go up in the quotient. It's got to be a 6. So that gives you a star. So you probably now know that you're going to be getting a repeating number, right? Because you're going to end up dividing or subtracting 18, and you're going to get another remainder of 2. So that's going to give you another star there. But if you can now tell that that's going to be a repeating number over and over, now you can stop and you can tell me, hey, this is going to be equal to, and that equal sign is going to give you a star, 25 and 6/10, because the 6 is the one that keeps repeating. So you don't have to put 66 hundredths. You can just put 6/10. One of the 6's is enough, as long as you put the line on top of the 6. So 25 and 6/10 gives you a star, and that line on top of the 6, which is called the bar notation, gives you a star as well. Okay, so now here's your final answer, 25 and 6/10. But Mr. Burgueño, what if you didn't know it was going to be repeating and you kept on dividing? Well, do you also have another option for this one? If you did it that way, here's the other stars that you could get instead of this one. So you have to add another 0, and then that would give you a star for that. And then you bring it down and you end up with 20 again. So you put another 6 up there in the quotient, and that's going to be the last 6 that we need, because now we have 3 digits behind the decimal in our answer, which means we have to round to the hundredths place. And the 6 is going to tell me that I need to round up to the next digit. So 5 or more raised to score is what I'm using here. The symbol for estimating or rounding is going to give you that squiggly line, so that will give you a star for that if you did it this way. And you end up with 25 and 67 hundredths, because the number in the thousands place tells me that the number in the hundreds place needs to be rounded up. So the 6 goes up to a 7. So that will be the final answer for that way of working it out. It's still going to give you credit for both ways, but I can't give you the stars for both. So this star, this star, this star, and that star are the optional stars. You don't get an extra 4 stars if you did it this way. You get the same amount of stars. So that means that those 4 stars are equivalent to this star, and that star. And I know there's only 3 green stars or green circles here and 4 orange circles, so I'm just going to give an extra star for the green ones to make it even. So the key idea is going to be the same thing as before. We're going to move the decimal point straight up in the quotient. That gives you a star for the key idea. So the total number of stars, if you count them right and you only count the greens, or you only count the orange ones, you only count one way or the other, that gives you a total number of 19 stars, okay, for this problem. Finally, multiplying decimals, we're going to multiply using the algorithm. Remember that we forget about the decimal. We multiply as if they were just whole numbers. So if you set it up like this, go ahead and give yourself a star. And then we start multiplying. 6 times 4 is 24, so there's the 4, carry the 2. Now we'll multiply 6 times 3, that's 18, plus the 2 gives me 20. So I'm going to put the 2 on the top and cross out the 2 that I already added to give me the 20 from 18. Now I'm going to multiply the 6 times the 2. 6 times 2 is 12, plus the 2 gives me 14. Cross out the 2 that I added. So if you ended up with 1,404 for the first line, you get a star for that. Next, you have to put a placeholder. That placeholder is important, so it gets its own little star. The next number I have to multiply by is the 7. So 7 times 4 is 28. There's my 8 and carry the 2. Now 7 times 3 is 21. Plus the 2 gives me 23. So there's the 3. I'm going to cross out the 2 that I already added and carry the next 2 on the next number. Now I'm going to multiply the 7 times 2, and that's 14. But plus the 2 that I have on the top gives me 16. So I'll cross it out once I add it. So the second line of numbers is 16,380. If you have that, you get a star for that. Now we're ready to add. So we'll go ahead and give yourself a star if you put that a plus sign there. So we're going to add 4 plus 0, that gives you 4. That gives you a star for that digit. 0 plus 8 gives you 8. That's a star. 4 plus 3 is 7. That's a star. 6 plus 1 is 7 also, and that's a star. Bring down the 1, and that's the last star for your digits. But we cannot forget about our decimal points. So we're going to put them back into our problem, and we're going to use our bubble strategy to figure out where our final decimal placement should be in the product. So here's 2 numbers that are behind the decimal That's 2 place values. So that's going to be a 2 in the first bubble. And you also have, and that's the star, and you also have 2 digits behind the decimal point and in the second factor. So that's also another 2 in that bubble. So 2 plus 2 gives you a total of 4, which is going to be the last bubble. And then you have to move the decimal 4 times. So you have to have 4 little swoops. And that's going to be where the decimal gets placed. So the first star I'm going to give you is this one for the 4 swoops. And the last star is going to be for the decimal place between the 1 and the 7. And then you're going to write your key idea, which is to use the bubble strategy to place the decimal point in the product. And that's a star as well. So the total number of stars for this one is a total of 16 stars. Now you're finished with the math review. Go ahead and do your reflection, which needs to be one of these 2. You can choose the first one or the second arrow, whichever one you want to write about. I was successful because blank, and I was unsuccessful because blank. Or you can just say my solution makes sense because blank. But you have to tell me specifically which solution you're talking about. How did you use estimation, or how did you use common sense to know that your answer makes sense? Okay, so tell me why. Now the total number of stars for this problem, 6 plus 6 plus 19 plus 16. If I add this correctly, I'm going to use a little estimation here. 19, I'm going to turn to 20. 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. Plus another 10, that gives me 28. Plus 20 gives me 48. But if I take 1 away, because it was at 19 instead of a 20, that gives me 47. So the total number of stars for this math review is a total of 47 stars. Okay, come to me if you listen to the keywords for today.